Once, when I was about 8 years old, I was playing during recess when I saw another boy push a little girl off the swing set down onto her face. She started crying immediately, of course, so I felt compelled to run over and see if she was okay. The other boy had already run off, and the little girl got up, and just as the teacher was walking over, she looked at me, and she was still crying, and she told the teacher that I did it. The teacher believed her, even though I was still walking up as the teacher was reaching the scene. I got in trouble, and everybody kept calling me a bully for the rest of the school year. What does this have to do with tonight's movie? A lot more than you might think. Here's your damn rant show, folks. Greetings and welcome to Film Rants. We're up to 51 episodes now, so maybe I'm finally getting the hang of this shit. I'm your host, E. Adam Thomas, and tonight we're pleased to bring you the second of 3 episodes dedicated to what is regarded by many to be the worst kind of Star Trek movie imaginable, the odd-numbered Star Trek films. Tonight's film is Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, made in 1984 on a budget of $17 million and directed by Leonard Nimoy. The film picks up where the Wrath of Khan left off, with the battle-damaged Enterprise limping home to Earth to pick up the pieces and mourn their beloved Vulcan friend. Bones seems to be suffering from some sort of psychotic break and keeps begging Captain Kirk to take him to Vulcan, half the time creepily speaking in Spock's voice. It becomes apparent that Spock somehow left the vast majority of his consciousness in McCoy's mind. Sort of like backing up his mental hard drive or something. Sarek, Spock's father, played brilliantly by Mark Leonard, implores Kirk to retrieve Spock's body from the Genesis planet and bring both of them back to Vulcan. There's a couple hitches, though, as Starfleet has quarantined the Genesis planet, and the Klingons, led by Christopher Lloyd, who seems to be really pissed off without his DeLorean for some reason, wants a shot at stealing the Genesis device research for themselves. Meanwhile, Saavik and Kirk's son David join a science team on the USS Grissom, no doubt named after the most awesome lead CSI in history, to study the Genesis planet, only to find that Spock ain't quite as deceased as everybody thought, although he sure as hell ain't himself. Anyway, the Klingons blow up the Grissom, Kirk blows up the Enterprise, the Genesis planet blows itself up, pretty much the clinical textbook definition of hijinks ensuing. Eventually, Spock's mind is restored, the crew is safe on Vulcan, Tyrion is cleared of Joffrey's murder, and the Doctor finally finds Gallifrey. Well, okay, maybe some of that didn't actually happen. But anyway, now for 30 years, this film has often been maligned along with the other odd-numbered Star Trek films, Star Trek the Motion Picture and Star Trek V. The popular opinion being that it's one of the worst Star Trek films ever made. Now, there is some basis for this opinion to a degree. The special effects are not quite up to par with the previous 2 installments. The storyline is a bit convoluted for its 105-minute runtime, and all of the Genesis planet sequences look very much like what they are, shot on a soundstage with less than effective lighting. Those scenes in particular look more like the film was shot as a TV episode instead of a major motion picture, but those elements are not really enough to make this a wholly bad movie experience. Admittedly, this was Leonard Nimoy's first big shot at the director's chair, and as with many freshman directors, there are bound to be some growing pains. But this is by far not the worst Star Trek film. In fact, personally, I rank it up there among the top 4. For one thing, Nimoy knows this cast, the premise, the material. He knew precisely what to do to get the best out of his entire company of performers. Shatner, who is well known for his tendency to chew up the scenery like a doomsday machine on angel dust, turns in a solid, balanced performance here. D. Kelly is always on top of his game, of course, and pretty much everyone is turning in some really good, clean work here. They draw you into the drama beautifully and with a nicely understated panache. As potentially messy as the story could have been, it's handled gracefully with a nice balance to the storyline progression. Everything in this movie happens for a reason. You are never left with a moment of, why the fuck did they do that? About the only thing that kind of irks me about is the scene with the Klingons on the Enterprise bridge, seemingly completely clueless as to what the fuck a countdown is. I mean, shit, have these smelly astards never watched a single episode of MacGyver? I find it absolutely inane that so-called fans of this series are so fucking dismissive of this movie, yet willing to accept Bandersnatch Cuttlefish in the role of originally originated by Ricardo Montalban. I'm sorry, but if you actually think Into Darkness is a better film than Search for Spock, you can fucking hand over your geek card right now and go back to watching the Kardashians ruin television. I think they are related, you know? Anyway. Seriously, eat a bag of rancid Ferengi dicks, you simpering Romulan petachs. This brings us to the little girl incident that I mentioned at the top of the show. I firmly believe that this movie has been lumped into the crap Trek category simply because it was unlucky enough to have something in common with the motion picture and the Final Frontier. It was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You idiots dismissed it years after it came out because it happened to be an odd-numbered Trek film. That's about as stupid of a reason to hate a film as you can get. It's okay to hate on a movie if it truly deserves your ire, but stop making imaginary fucking reasons to hate movies just because they have something in common with other films you hate. And you know what? That goes for human beings too. If someone is truly a dick, an asshole, or a downright horrible person, then they deserve what they get. But to hate on someone because of their race, sexual preference, or theological beliefs is a motherfucking ignorant and shameful. It's shameful. Cut it out, people. You're better than that. At least Gene Roddenberry believed you were. Computer, initiate rantometer sequence Kirk Epsilon 7. For artistic, I am giving Search for Spock a 3.5, losing a 1.5 for some iffy technical issues with the effects and the lighting. Coolness gets a 5, and originality a 4. I honestly cannot give it any suckitude points because nothing about this film outright sucks. That gives Star Trek 3 a score of 12.5. Honestly, the best of all of the odd-numbered Trek films to date, and a couple of the even-numbered ones I could mention too. Next week, we'll look at our third installment, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, directed by William Shatner. You probably already have a pretty good idea as to how I'm going to rate this film, but you gotta tune in anyway because it's always fun to watch me teeter on the precipice of a cinematic aneurysm. It's painful, but fun, I guess. Don't forget, we're always hoping to hear from you. Email me at filmrantseat@cox.net, comment on the video here on YouTube, or just look us up on Facebook at www.facebook.com/filmrantseat. In the meantime, don't call me Tiny.
Angry Men Reviews. Many fucks said, no fucks given.
Don't call me Tiny.